headlines. The IDF is expanding its operations in the Rafah area. Israel is under growing international pressure, and no breakthrough yet in the negotiations to free the hostages. The IDF is expanding its operations in the Rafah area. I-24 News' Robert Swift has the latest.
Israel is pressing ahead, moving deeper into Rafah. Its tanks are now operating inside the city's center. As has been seen elsewhere in Gaza, Hamas are unable to halt the weight of the Israeli army's advance, but are capable of exacting a price in blood through asymmetric attacks using snipers, RPGs, and mortars. On Wednesday morning, the IDF announced the deaths of 3 soldiers killed in fighting inside Rafah. And Hamas continues to launch rockets into Israeli territory.
So meanwhile, Israel is under growing international pressure, both from the Western world and moderate Arab countries. I-24 News' Bianca Zanini has more.
The sound of sirens in Rafah is constant. Despite repeated international calls and warnings to stop its military operation in Rafah, Israel pushes on. The world is watching and condemning, from the slogan "All Eyes on Rafah," which has gone viral in recent days, to growing criticism from allies. And Israel is increasingly isolated on the global stage.
We want this to stop, right? Whether and that applies to today, yesterday, the day before. We have been very consistent in our call for a ceasefire, for the release of the hostages, for greater humanitarian access.
The UN condemned Sunday's attack in Rafah, where almost 50 Palestinians were killed in a massive fire. Israel called it a tragic mistake, but for an increasing number of world leaders, their patience is running out.
Algeria will circulate this afternoon.
Yes, exactly. We know that Israel has delivered a proposal for the Egyptians and the Qataris, the mediators, in order to deliver it to Hamas. But Hamas has said, unofficially at least yesterday, to Saudi media that they will not participate in any talks unless Israel stops its operation in Rafah. Now, we know from an Egyptian source today telling I-24 News that Israel, in one of the draft proposals that it gave the Egyptians, it has been agreed, or Israel has agreed, to a sustainable end of the fighting. Now, this is not end of the war, and this is coming after Hamas's demands to end the war as a major obstacle to reaching an agreement for a hostage deal, since actually the end of the last hostage deal in November last year. So Israel is agreeing to, in these words, to a sustainable end of the fight.
To Lebanon, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Mikati announced on Tuesday that the country has reached out to Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan to facilitate the return of Syrian refugees to their country. And we're going to talk about this with David Oat from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much for joining us. Tell me,
for having me.
What do you think about this program, and what are the chances of this plan?
Look, Lebanon has been trying to rid itself of the Syrian refugee population that it's had for some time. There have been several schemes that have been devised, either in cooperation with the Syrian government, bilaterally, that saw some limited results, some limited repatriation of Syrians already over the past few years. These Syrians do present a financial burden on Lebanon's increasingly meager resources. Will this work? It has more chances to work in theory because it is multilateral and is premised on the idea of creating more safe zones in Syria for the Syrian refugees to return home. But it's hard to say now. It's at this stage, it seems like one of several schemes that Lebanon has tried to engage in to, again, rid itself of the Syrian refugee population problem.
To Bastien Bori in Dubai to talk about Qatar's plans for displaced people in northern Syria. Hi, Bastien. What's the plan there?
Well, Jacob, we're talking about more than 1,100 new homes in northern Syria, funded by Qatar, in 142-story buildings. This is the largest village open to date in northern Syria, with a clinic, a school, a mosque, shops, etc., to supposedly welcome a tiny fraction of Syrians who had to leave Aleppo because of the civil war. So on paper, it may sound like a good thing or a good idea, but in reality, no one really knows who will be welcomed in this village. Are we talking about displaced, unarmed Syrian civilians, or extremist militants from local factions supported by Qatar and Turkey? Probably both.
And now, a surprising group of people is showing support for Israel these days. I-24 News' Nicole Sedek has this unusual story.
A large display of solidarity seen in the streets of Ashkelon in southern Israel. But take a closer look, and you may be surprised by who's actually waving these blue and white flags.
Basically, my whole family was involved in the Second World War. They were Nazis. They were known as a Nazi family in town.
Hundreds of Germans with their own family history of anti-Semitism.
It's very important for me to be here to say my family story because I'm a descendant of Nazi perpetrators. My family was actively involved in the Holocaust. My grandparents, also my grandmothers. And as I found out, I was very shocked, and I want to speak about because my grandparents, they didn't speak about it.
They're all in the Jewish state participating in March of the Nations, a solidarity mission that brings together Holocaust survivors with descendants of the Nazi regime.
I can't change the past, but it's my responsibility to affect the future and the present times.
And their mission is working.
Not only they are not blamed in what their grandfathers done, but also they take responsibility for those deeds. So I don't see anything more high, more pure, and more human that
On I-24 News, I'm Khaled Ben David. It is day 236 of Israel's war against Hamas, a conflict that won't be ending anytime soon, with Israel's National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, saying today that the war is expected to continue another 7 months into early next year. And the cost of that fight grows daily. The IDF announced